Hey, it's Trailblazer with a fresh helping of tactics advice for tabletop BattleTech. I wanted to talk today about how to use one of the coolest mechs from lots of different eras of BattleTech, the Grasshopper, as well as some of its close relatives. Now, just to get on the same page, when we're talking about the Grasshopper, we're talking about a mech that carries an arsenal based around a whole ton of medium lasers. The original 3025 one has 4 medium lasers plus a large laser, and a mech that has plenty of armor and that jumps 4. These are the key characteristics of a Grasshopper. Later on, when we get into more high tech, there's updated Grasshoppers that carry medium pulse lasers, which are a huge increase to this mech's capabilities. In 3055, we have the Penetrator, which is basically an upgraded Grasshopper that's based around medium pulse lasers. So when I talk about how to use a Grasshopper, I'm also talking about how do you use a Penetrator. So what are the key traits of this kind of mech that dictate its role on the battlefield? Well, first of all, because it's got those 4 spaces worth of jump movement, the mech is mobile within a small radius. It can get anywhere within 4 spaces, so you can be guaranteed that if you've got a problem within 4 spaces, the Grasshopper could potentially solve it, but it's not going to go ripping across the battlefield really quickly. Second thing to notice is if it's shooting at you, it's likely to hit with something, because the Grasshopper is going to be firing a large number of weapons. So even if the odds for each individual weapon to hit are pretty low, probably at least one of those medium lasers is going to connect. And finally, it's got plenty of armor, as I said, so it's not going to die easily. You can match it up against something that can do some damage to it, and it won't just fold very quickly. So if we're talking about a mech that can get anywhere within a small radius quickly, and that's likely to hit with something every time it shoots, what are the roles that would naturally fit a unit like that? The first one is as a guardian against fast units coming in from your enemy. The reason for this is that the Grasshopper has such great odds to hit that even if it's firing at a mech that's been moving really fast, a light mech that's coming in, it's likely to hit with at least one of those medium lasers. And if it's shooting at a light mech, a medium laser hitting a light mech can be a lot of trouble. A light mech can only take so many hits from a medium laser. The Grasshopper isn't going to serve the function of hunting light mechs like a Phoenix Hawk can, because unlike a Phoenix Hawk, there's no chance of the Grasshopper catching up to a light mech that doesn't want to be caught. So instead what you want to do is guard a fixed location or guard one of your own units that's moving slowly with the Grasshopper. Send the Grasshopper to that location or send it with that unit to protect that objective or that unit against enemy fast units that might come in and attack it. The second role is to attack a tough enemy unit from behind to damage its rear armor. So if you're fighting against something like an Atlas, some kind of a large, dangerous mech, of course, taking on that mech from the front is going to potentially be disastrous. But a thing that the Grasshopper can do with its mobility is if it's engaged in any way with that dangerous mech, it can jump and get into its rear arc. And then, of course, because it jumped, it might have a hard time hitting with any one of its weapons. But since it's firing so many weapons, or in later eras, if it's firing pulse weapons, it has excellent odds to hit that target with enough weapons to do some serious damage to the rear armor. Now, first of all, in that second role, as an attacker against tough targets, we got to think about which enemy heavy mechs will be a good target for a Grasshopper or a Penetrator. Not every heavy mech is going to be a perfect target for a Grasshopper. If they have flippable arms with weapons that can shoot well at short range, that makes them a pretty bad target because they can easily fire back at the Grasshopper. Or if they have a ton of rear armor like an Awesome does, it's going to be hard to cut through that even with all of the lasers on a Grasshopper. So the ideal target is something like this Warhammer, which has relatively thin rear armor, and the weapons that it has on its arms are PPCs with a minimum range. So if you get right behind that thing, it's not going to have very much recourse against you. It's not going to be able to bring much of its firepower to bear, at least not with any kind of good odds to hit. Of course, when you have a unit like this that moves 4 at a jump, there's always the question, when do you use that jump capability? Because it isn't always advantageous to use it when you're jumping 4. You're giving yourself 3 points more difficulty to hit, and you're only giving your opponent 2 points more difficulty to hit. If you're facing one of these heavy targets like the Warhammer, it's really crucial that you get into the rear arc. So in this situation, the Penetrator definitely wants to jump, because that's the only way it can get directly behind the Warhammer and start attacking that rear armor. On the other hand, when you are in that light mech guarding role, it's much less crucial to get into the rear arc. Look at this diagram. How important is it to get into the rear arc of that commando? Sure, you could do it with a jump, but how much weaker is the commando's rear armor than its front armor? The commando's front armor is already very vulnerable. So it's much more important when you're fighting the commando to get into a position where you have excellent 2-hit numbers, and it's less important to get into that position where you're attacking the rear. It is crucial to get right up next to that light mech to give yourself a chance to land a kick, which can of course be devastating against light mechs. But as you see in this situation, we can do that just by walking. And now you can see that by walking up to the commando, we've gotten ourselves a 7 to hit with those medium lasers. So that commando is in real trouble. On the other hand, if we had jumped into the commando's rear arc, we would have a 9 to hit, which would not be anywhere near as dangerous. Now when you get into later eras and you're using a Penetrator or you're using an upgraded Grasshopper with pulse lasers, this is a less important factor because it's very easy to hit with the pulse lasers a lot of the time. But even so, against these light mechs, the key is to get in as many hits as you can, because once you start getting in a significant number of hits, they're going down, whether those hits are against the front or against the rear. And when it comes to the heavy mechs, just keep in mind what are the best targets for the Grasshopper. Take a look at that rear armor. See if the rear locations would go internal if you hit them twice with a medium laser. That's what you want. And check if they have exploding components in those torsos. Check if they have extra light engines. If you send a Grasshopper against something like a Crusader with ammo stuck in those side torsos, if you send it against something like a Penetrator that has an exploding Gauss rifle right on top of an extra light engine, those mechs are in serious danger from a Grasshopper. Those are the targets that you want to zero in on.